Commander stood before the massive holographic display in the war room deep beneath the city of. The blue light cast shadows across his pale, elongated face as he studied the tactical information. The numbers were clear, and they were terrible. 3 years ago, the Devourers had arrived at 442b like a plague from the depths of space. They came in ships that looked alive, pulsing with dark energy and covered in what seemed like organic armor. The Defense Corps had tried everything they knew to stop them. Their energy shields had held for 6 months before the creatures found a way to drain them. Their automated defense systems had worked for another year before the Devourers learned to corrupt their programming. Their plasma weapons had been effective until the enemy adapted and grew thicker armor. Now only the city of remained. 12 million huddled in underground shelters, while the last of their military forces prepared for what everyone knew would be their final battle. "Sir," Lieutenant approached with a data pad in her thin hands. "The scout drones have returned with new intelligence." Took the device and read the report. His heart sank further. The Devourer army had grown again. What had been millions was now tens of millions. The creatures consumed everything they touched: plants, animals, even the minerals in the soil, and used that energy to create more soldiers for their swarm. "How long do we have?" he asked, though he already knew the answer would not be good. 2 days, perhaps 3 if we're lucky," A replied. "Our remaining shield generators cannot hold against that many bioforms." Walked to the large window that looked out over the city. Even from underground, he could see the lights of through the transparent aluminum barriers. Beautiful spires of crystal and metal reached toward the sky. Gardens floated between buildings on anti-gravity platforms. It had taken the 3,000 years to build this civilization. In 3 days, it would all be gone. "Have we heard anything from the Confederation?" he asked. "Nothing helpful," A said quietly. "Admiral sent a message yesterday. He said our world has been classified as a strategic loss. They're pulling all remaining ships back to defend the core worlds." Was not surprised. The Galactic Confederation was practical above all else. They had already lost 17 worlds to the Devourers. The mathematics of war meant some places had to be sacrificed to save others. 442b was far from the important trade routes and military bases. It made sense to abandon them. That did not make it hurt any less. "Sir," another officer called from across the room, "we're receiving multiple distress signals from the outer settlements. The creatures are moving faster than expected." The holographic display changed to show new enemy positions. Red dots representing Devourer forces were spreading across the planet's surface like an infection. Some were already much closer to the city than the previous estimates had suggested. "Update the timeline," ordered. "It looks like we have 1 day, not 2. The room fell silent except for the soft humming of the computers and life support systems. Everyone understood what this meant. They had prepared for this moment, but that did not make it easier to accept. Thought about his family. His mate N and their 2 children were already in the deep shelters with the other civilians. He had promised them he would find a way to keep them safe. Now he would have to break that promise. "Begin Evacuation Protocol 7, he said. "Move all non-essential personnel to the deepest shelters. Prepare the quantum archives." Sir, I looked confused. "If we cannot save our people, we can at least save our history," explained. "Future generations should know that the civilization existed. They should know we were a peaceful people who loved art and science and beauty." The truth was painful but simple. They were not warriors. They had developed incredible technology over thousands of years of peace. They could manipulate matter at the atomic level. They could fold space to travel between stars. They could cure any disease and extend life for centuries. But they had never learned to fight with the brutal efficiency that survival sometimes required. When the Devourers came, they had tried to negotiate. When that failed, they had tried to run. When that became impossible, they had tried to hide. Now there was nowhere left to go. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "I'm picking up something strange on the long-range scanners. Multiple ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of our system." Felt a small spark of hope. Confederation reinforcements. "I don't think so, sir. The energy signatures are completely different. These ships are using primitive chemical rockets and nuclear reactors. The design is unlike anything in our databases." "Are they responding to our distress calls?" "Yes, sir. But the signal is very weak, and the translation matrix is having trouble with their language. It's some kind of basic radio transmission instead of quantum entanglement." Walked over to the communication station. If someone had come to help, even if they were strangers, it might make a difference. Any help was better than facing the end alone. "Put it through the speakers," he ordered. Static filled the room, broken by a voice speaking in a language that sounded harsh and choppy compared to the musical tones of speech. The translation computer worked to make sense of the words. "This is Task Force Endurance, Human Colonial Marines," the voice said in badly pronounced Galactic Standard. "We received your distress call. Hold the line, we're coming." Stared at the communications officer. "Human, I've never heard of this species." "Neither have I, sir. They're not in any of our databases, but their ships are definitely real and they're heading toward our planet." "How many ships?" "Scanning now. I count 47 vessels, sir. Most appear to be military." It was not a large fleet compared to what the Confederation usually sent, but it was more than they had right now. Allowed himself to feel a small amount of hope for the first time in days. "Send a response," he ordered. "Tell them about our situation. Give them all the tactical data we have on the Devourers." Maybe these mysterious humans could help. Maybe there was still a chance to save his people and his world. Or maybe 47 ships would simply join the long list of everything the Devourers had consumed. Time would tell. The Devourer swarm moved across the crystalline plains of 442b like a living shadow. From his observation post on the outer defensive line, Captain H watched through his binoculars as millions of creatures flowed toward the city. They looked like giant insects crossed with machines, their dark shells gleaming in the alien sunlight. The creatures did not move randomly. Every step was calculated, every formation perfect. The swarm intelligence that controlled them was older than most civilizations and had learned efficiency through the consumption of 17 worlds. They wasted no energy on unnecessary movements or displays of aggression. They simply advanced with mechanical precision toward their goal. "Captain," Sergeant said from beside him, "the electromagnetic readings are off the charts. The creatures are communicating constantly." H nodded. The Devourers spoke to each other through pulses of electromagnetic energy, creating a hive mind that could coordinate millions of individual units. No matter how many you killed, the rest would instantly adapt to whatever weapon or tactic you used. It was like fighting a single massive brain with millions of bodies. "How long until they reach our position?" he asked. 6 hours, sir. Maybe less if they increase their pace." H looked back toward the city still visible in the distance. The beautiful crystal spires caught the light like jewels, but soon they would be nothing but raw material for the swarm to consume. Everything they had built over thousands of years would become part of the enemy. The captain's communication device crackled to life. "All forward units, this is command. Begin fallback to secondary positions. Repeat, begin fallback now." "You heard them," H told his soldiers. "Pack up and move out. We're not dying out here when we can make our stand from better positions closer to the city." The military had learned hard lessons over the past 3 years. In the beginning, they had tried to meet the Devourers in open battle. Entire armies had been wiped out in hours. The creatures were individually stronger and faster than, and their hive mind made them impossible to outmaneuver. The only successful strategy was to slow them down with hit-and-run attacks while falling back to stronger positions. Make them pay for every mile of ground. Force them to waste energy breaking through fortifications. Buy time for the civilians to evacuate. Except there was nowhere left to evacuate to. As H and his unit began their retreat, he thought about the strange message they had received from the unknown humans. 47 ships against the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. It seemed like a foolish gesture, but at least someone was willing to try. Back in the command center beneath, studied the latest reports from his scouts. The Devourer advance was proceeding exactly as predicted. They would be at the outer defensive ring by evening, through it by midnight, and at the city walls before dawn. "Sir," Lieutenant approached with another update. "We've received a detailed response from the human fleet. Their commander wants to speak with you directly." "Put her through," said. The holographic projector activated, showing the image of a human female wearing what appeared to be military clothing. She had short dark hair and scars on her face that suggested she had seen combat before. Her eyes were hard but intelligent. "Commander," she said in heavily accented Galactic Standard, "I'm Colonel Sarah, Human Colonial Marines. I've reviewed your tactical data on these Devourer things. We're going to help you kill them." "Colonel," replied, "I appreciate your willingness to assist, but I must inform you that the situation is hopeless. Our calculations show that even with your ships, we cannot achieve victory. Perhaps you should withdraw and warn your people about this threat." The human woman made a sound that the translator identified as laughter, but it did not sound amused. "Commander, my people don't do math when it comes to fighting. We do math when we're building bridges or calculating fuel consumption. When someone threatens innocent civilians, we don't calculate odds. We just show up and start shooting." "But the enemy numbers are overwhelming," protested. "Our intelligence indicates over 50 million bioforms advancing on our position." 50 million. The expression did not change. "We've had worse odds. At the Battle of New Stalingrad, my grandfather's unit held off 300,000 enemy soldiers with just 8,000 Marines. They held for 6 days until reinforcements arrived." "Did not understand. How is that possible?" "Humans are stubborn, Commander. We don't know when to quit. Sometimes that gets us killed, but sometimes it wins wars." Leaned forward slightly. "Here's what we're going to do. My fleet is going to punch through the Devourer naval forces and establish a landing zone. We'll set up defensive positions and draw their attention away from your city." "You cannot hope to stop them all," said. "We don't have to stop them all. We just have to break their coordination and kill enough of them to make the rest think twice about staying in our galaxy." The connection was interrupted as alarms began blaring throughout the command center. The main tactical display showed new contacts in orbit Devourer bioships moving to intercept the incoming human fleet. "Sir," the sensor operator called out, "the humans are not slowing down. They're flying straight into the enemy formation at maximum speed." On the display, the two fleets crashed into each other like waves meeting rocks. The Devourer ships were larger and more advanced, but the human vessels fought with a reckless aggression that seemed to surprise their enemies. Instead of trying to maintain formation or protect their flanks, the humans scattered and attacked from every direction at once. Explosion after explosion lit up the orbital battlefield. Several human ships were destroyed in the first few minutes, but they kept fighting. More importantly, they kept the Devourer fleet occupied while other human vessels broke through toward the planet's surface. "Sir," I said in amazement, "some of their ships are getting through. They're beginning atmospheric entry now." Watched as dozens of human landing craft plunged through the atmosphere like metal meteors. The Devourers on the ground immediately began redirecting some of their forces to deal with this new threat. "Colonel," said into his communicator, "your people are very brave, but this will only delay the inevitable." "Commander," came her reply over the sound of weapons fire and shouting. "You keep using that word inevitable. Where I come from, we have a saying, the only thing that's inevitable is death and taxes. Everything else is just a problem that needs solving." The first human landing craft hit the ground with tremendous force, throwing up clouds of dirt and debris. Instead of the smooth, controlled landings that technology allowed, these ships simply crashed into the surface and immediately began disgorging soldiers who started building fortifications. "What are they doing?" asked. On the display, human soldiers were digging holes in the ground and stacking dirt into barriers. They were using primitive tools and weapons that looked crude compared to technology, but they worked with incredible speed and efficiency, as if they had done this many times before. Within an hour, the humans had established 3 separate defensive positions between the Devourer army and the city. The positions did not look impressive, just holes and mounds of dirt, but they were in exactly the right locations to force the enemy to change their attack route. "Sir," the communications officer reported, "the lead elements of the Devourer swarm have reached the first human position. Engagement has begun." The sounds of battle echoed across the plain: explosions, energy weapons, and something else. Something that sounded like humans shouting battle cries as they fought. For the first time in 3 years, the Devourer advance had stopped moving forward. Colonel Sarah crouched in the muddy trench her Marines had dug into the alien soil and checked her rifle one more time. Around her, 50 soldiers prepared for the fight of their lives. The Devourers would reach their position in less than 10 minutes. "Martinez," she called to her sergeant, "how are the charges looking?" "All set, ma'am," Sergeant Martinez replied, his weathered face grim. "We've got explosives under every approach route. When these bugs get close enough, we'll give them a warm welcome." Nodded and activated her communication device. "Commander, this is Colonel. Are you monitoring our position?" "Yes, Colonel," came this voice. "I must say, your defensive preparations are unusual. Are you certain those simple earth barriers will provide adequate protection?" "Commander, my people have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We've learned that the best defense is usually a hole in the ground and a good field of fire." Peered over the edge of her trench at the approaching enemy. "Besides, we're not here to defend. We're here to attack." "Attack, but you're vastly outnumbered." "Numbers don't mean everything, sir. Sometimes it's about who wants to win more." The first Devourer scouts appeared on the horizon, tall, dark creatures that moved on 6 legs with the fluid grace of insects. Their shells looked like black metal and could see weapons built into their bodies. Behind them came thousands more, then millions, flowing across the landscape like a dark tide. "Jesus Christ," whispered Private Johnson, a young Marine from Earth's agricultural colonies. "There's so many of them." "Language," Johnson said calmly. "And yes, there are a lot of them. That just means we'll have plenty of targets." The Devourers moved in perfect formation, each creature exactly the right distance from its neighbors. They advanced at a steady pace that never varied, never showed hesitation or fear. It was like watching a machine made of living parts. "All units," spoke into her communicator, "remember your training. These things coordinate through electromagnetic signals. If we can disrupt that coordination, even for a few seconds, we can cause serious damage to their formation." "How do we disrupt it?" asked Lieutenant from 2nd Platoon. "With these," held up a small device that looked like a modified radio. "EMP grenades. They won't hurt the creatures directly, but they should scramble their communications for a short time." Commander's voice came through the communicator again. "Colonel, our sensors indicate the enemy will reach your position in 5 minutes. Perhaps you should consider falling back to a more defensible location." "Negative, Commander. We're staying right here." "But your weapons appear to be primitive chemical projectiles. Our plasma weapons barely slowed these creatures down." Smiled grimly. "Commander, sometimes the old ways are the best ways. A bullet doesn't need to be fancy to kill something. It just needs to hit the right spot moving fast enough." The Devourers were close enough now that could see individual details. Each creature was about the size of a large horse, but built like a predator. Their shells were covered in what looked like armor plating, and weapons that resembled organic cannons grew from their backs. "First wave incoming," Martinez shouted. The lead Devourers broke into a run, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move. They came straight toward the human positions without any attempt to take cover or use tactics. They simply charged forward with mechanical determination. "Hold your fire," ordered. "Let them get closer." The creatures reached the halfway point between their starting position and the human trenches. Then they hit the first obstacle Marines had prepared, a minefield made from improvised explosives. The explosion sent dirt and alien body parts flying in all directions. Dozens of Devourers were destroyed instantly, but the rest simply flowed around the craters and kept coming. They showed no fear, no hesitation, no concern for their fallen comrades. "Now that's just rude," Martinez commented. "Usually when we blow up that many bad guys, the rest stop to think about it." "These things don't think like us," replied. "Open fire." 50 human rifles began shooting at once. The sound was like thunder rolling across the alien landscape. Watched her bullets strike the lead Devourer and was pleased to see that, while its armor was tough, it was not bulletproof. The creature stumbled and fell, green fluid leaking from multiple wounds. But more kept coming. "EMP grenades now," shouted. Her Marines threw the small devices toward the approaching swarm. When they exploded, there was no visible blast, but suddenly the perfect formation of attacking creatures broke apart. Individual Devourers stumbled into each other or moved in the wrong direction, their coordination disrupted. "Pour it on them while they're confused," ordered. The Marines increased their rate of fire, targeting the disorganized creatures. For 30 seconds, the human position was completely effective. Dozens of Devourers fell before they could reorganize. Then the electromagnetic interference faded, and the swarm regained its coordination. "Incoming," someone shouted. The surviving Devourers opened fire with their organic weapons, sending streams of acidic bioplasma toward the human trenches. Ducked as green energy blasts passed overhead, melting the dirt barriers her men had built. "Return fire, keep shooting." The battle became a desperate exchange of gunfire and energy blasts. The humans had good cover and knew how to use it, but the aliens had superior firepower and numbers. More Devourers kept arriving every minute, adding their weapons to the attack. "Colonel," Martinez crawled over to his position, "we're taking casualties, and Williams are down and our ammunition won't last forever." "How much do we have left?" asked while reloading her rifle. "Maybe 20 minutes at this rate of fire." "Then we make every shot count," activated her communicator. "All units switch to single shots, make them think twice about showing themselves." From his command center, Commander watched the battle with a mixture of amazement and confusion. The humans were fighting with a style he had never seen before. They were not trying to preserve their equipment or minimize their losses. They were simply trying to kill as many enemies as possible. "Sir," Lieutenant said, "the human position is holding, but they cannot maintain this much longer. Should we send our remaining forces to assist them?" "With what?" replied. "We have fewer than 5,000 soldiers left, and most of our equipment is damaged or destroyed." The humans seemed to be doing well with simple projectile weapons. Perhaps we could help them somehow. Studied the tactical display. The human position was like a small rock in a river of enemies. The Devourers were flowing around it rather than over it, which was more than any force had achieved in 3 years of fighting. "Colonel," he called through the communicator, "what can we do to assist you?" "Send us more ammunition if you have any that fits our weapons," replied between bursts of gunfire. "And maybe some of your medical supplies. We've got wounded." "We don't have weapons compatible with yours, but we can send medical aid." "Appreciated, Commander. By the way, these bugs seem to have a weak spot where their head connects to their body. Pass that along to your people in case it helps." Was amazed. Even while fighting for their lives, the humans were gathering intelligence and sharing it with their allies. Most species became focused only on survival when faced with such overwhelming odds. "Colonel, how long can you hold your position?" he asked. "As long as we need to, Commander. That's what Marines do." On the battlefield, the fight continued with brutal intensity. The humans had killed hundreds of devourers, but thousands more kept coming. The aliens were learning too, adapting their attacks to deal with human tactics. But every time they tried something new, the humans tried something newer. When the devourers started using their fallen comrades as cover, the humans set their corpses on fire. When the aliens tried to tunnel under the human positions, the Marines collapsed the tunnels with grenades. Most importantly, the humans never stopped fighting. No matter how bad things got, no matter how many of their friends were killed, they kept shooting and kept calling out encouragement to each other. And slowly, something impossible began to happen. The Devourer advance started to slow down. The battle had been raging for 6 hours, and the humans were still fighting. Commander could not understand it. By every logical calculation, their position should have been overrun within the first hour. Yet somehow, 50 human soldiers were holding off thousands of Devourers. "Sir," Lieutenant said, studying the sensor readings, "the enemy electromagnetic communications are becoming erratic. It's like their hive mind is having trouble processing what's happening." "What do you mean?" asked. "The Devourers coordinate through shared information. Each unit reports what it encounters, and the collective mind calculates the best response. But the humans keep doing things that don't make sense to the hive intelligence." On the tactical display, watched as a group of human soldiers ran directly into enemy fire to rescue a wounded comrade. 3 of them were killed in the process, but they succeeded in bringing their friend back to safety. It was tactically foolish but emotionally powerful. The hive mind cannot understand why they would sacrifice multiple healthy units to save one damaged unit, continued. "It's not efficient." "But it's very human," observed. Colonel's voice came through the communicator, interrupted by the sound of explosions and gunfire. "Commander, we're implementing Plan Baker. Things might get a little loud." "What is Plan Baker?" asked. "You'll see." Across the battlefield, the human Marines began doing something that shocked both the Devourers. Instead of staying in their defensive positions, they launched counterattacks. Small groups of soldiers would sprint out of their trenches, attack enemy formations with grenades and close-range weapons, then retreat before the aliens could respond effectively. "They're insane," one of his officers muttered. "They're attacking an enemy that outnumbers them 1,000 to 1. But the attacks were working. Each raid destroyed dozens of Devourers and forced the rest to reorganize. More importantly, it disrupted the aliens' coordinated advance. The hive mind had to constantly recalculate its strategy to deal with these unpredictable human tactics. Private Johnson crouched behind a pile of alien corpses, breathing heavily after his 3rd raid of the day. His uniform was covered in green alien blood and human dirt. 2 of his had been killed in the last attack, but they had taken out an entire Devourer command cluster. "Johnson," Sergeant Martinez called out, "how's your ammunition?" "Down to my last magazine, Sarge," Johnson replied. "Same here, time to get creative." Martinez had been a Marine for 15 years and had fought on 6 different worlds. He knew how to make war with whatever materials were available. "Grab some of those alien weapons. Let's see if we can figure out how they work." The human soldiers began scavenging equipment from dead devourers. The organic weapons were designed for creatures with 6 limbs and different body chemistry, but the Marines were good at improvising. Within an hour, they had rigged several alien guns to fire when humans pulled the triggers. "Well, that's new," commented as she watched her soldiers turn devourer weapons against their former owners. "I don't think the enemy was expecting that." Indeed, the alien hive mind was struggling to process this development. Its calculations were based on known weapon capabilities and standard tactical doctrine. The idea that an enemy would steal and modify equipment mid-battle was outside its programming. But the humans were just getting started. When their improvised alien weapons ran out of bioplasma, they used the empty casings as clubs. When their grenades were expended, they made new explosives from alien power cells and human ingenuity. When their medical supplies ran low, they used alien healing gel on human wounds. "These humans adapt faster than any species we've encountered," told his staff. "They're like water flowing around obstacles." "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "I'm receiving reports from our scouts. The main devourer army is changing direction. Instead of advancing on the city, they're sending more forces toward the human position." "How many more?" "Approximately 2 million additional bioforms, sir." His heart skipped a beat. 2 million fresh enemies against 50 exhausted humans. It would be a massacre. "Colonel," he called urgently, "you need to withdraw immediately. The enemy is sending massive reinforcements to your position." "How massive?" Reply was calm despite the chaos around her. 2 million creatures, Colonel. You cannot possibly survive that assault." There was a pause, then his voice came back with what the translator identified as amusement. "Commander, do you know what we call 2 million enemies in one location?" "What?" "A target-rich environment." Did not understand human humor, but he was beginning to understand human psychology. These creatures did not think about war the same way other species did. They did not calculate odds or minimize losses. They simply fought until either they won or they died. On the battlefield, the situation was about to get much worse. The new devourer forces were different from the first wave. These were larger, more heavily armed, and equipped with specialized bioweapons designed for breaking through fortifications. "Incoming artillery," someone shouted. The devourer biocannons opened fire, sending explosive projectiles toward the human trenches. The first salvo killed 8 Marines and destroyed most of their remaining equipment. "That's gonna leave a mark," Martinez commented as he crawled out of a collapsed section of trench. "Is everyone still breathing?" called out. A quick roll call revealed that 23 humans were still capable of fighting. 23 soldiers against 2 million enemies. By any reasonable standard, it was hopeless. But humans, as the galaxy was learning, were not reasonable. "All right, Marines," said, her voice carrying across the position. "We've got good news and bad news. The bad news is we're outnumbered about 90,000 to 1. The good news is we won't have any trouble finding targets." The surviving soldiers actually laughed, heard them through the open communication channel and could not believe it. They were about to die, and they were making jokes. "Listen up," continued. "We've done something no other force in this galaxy has managed to do. We've stopped a devourer advance for 6 hours. We've killed thousands of them. We've shown these bugs that they're not invincible." "But ma'am," one of the younger Marines said, "there's so many of them. How can 23 people fight 2 million? "Same way one person fights one," replied. "You aim, you shoot, you move to the next target. The only difference is we'll be busy for a while." She activated her communicator one last time. "Commander, it's been an honor working with you. Take care of your people. And remember, humans don't surrender. We just reload." The second wave of devourers began their assault. But this time, something was different. The creatures that had fought humans for 6 hours moved differently than those that had not. They were more cautious, less coordinated, as if the hive mind was uncertain about how to proceed. Fighting humans had damaged something in their collective intelligence. The mathematical precision that had allowed them to conquer 17 worlds was beginning to break down. And in their trenches, 23 human Marines prepared to show 2 million alien creatures what determination really meant. The second wave hit the human position like a tsunami of claws, weapons, and chittering alien voices. Colonel watched 2 million devourers flow across the battlefield toward her 23 remaining Marines, and she smiled. "Well," she said to Sergeant Martinez as they crouched in what was left of their trench, "this should be interesting." The first lesson the devourers learned was that humans became more dangerous when cornered, not less. When the aliens overran the outer defensive line, they expected the humans to break and run. Instead, the Marines fell back to secondary positions and kept fighting. When those positions were overrun, they retreated to tertiary positions. When those fell, they fought from individual foxholes. When the foxholes were destroyed, they fought standing in the open. "Martinez," called out over the sound of alien weapons fire, "how many grenades do we have left?" "6, ma'am, and Johnson rigged up something special with that alien power core." Private Johnson held up a device that looked like an alien battery pack wrapped in human explosives. "It's not regulation, Colonel, but it should make a really big boom." "Outstanding. Save it for when we get a good crowd of them together." The Devourers were learning other lessons too. They discovered that humans would use anything as a weapon. When their ammunition ran out, they fought with bayonets. When the bayonets broke, they used knives. When the knives were lost, they used rocks, alien body parts, and their own bare hands. More confusing to the hive mind was that humans seemed to get more determined as their situation got worse. Logic dictated that a species should surrender when defeat became inevitable. Instead, these creatures fought harder. "Sir," Lieutenant A called out in the command center, "the electromagnetic patterns from the devourer hive mind are becoming increasingly chaotic. I'm reading massive processing errors in their coordination network." Commander studied the data. "What kind of errors?" "The hive intelligence is trying to calculate optimal responses to human tactics, but the humans keep changing their behavior. Every time the devourers adapt to one strategy, the humans switch to something completely different." On the battlefield, this was exactly what was happening. The aliens had programmed responses for every type of military strategy they had encountered in their conquest of 17 worlds. But they had never fought an enemy that used humor as a psychological weapon. "Hey, ugly," Marine Phillips shouted at a charging devourer. "Your mama was a computer virus." He shot the creature 3 times before diving behind cover. The alien hive mind tried to process the meaning of this communication. Was it a tactical code? A religious incantation? A threat of some kind? The failure to understand such a simple concept created processing delays that rippled through the entire network. Meanwhile, the humans continued to do impossible things. When Corporal Davies was wounded and couldn't walk, he didn't retreat to safety. Instead, he positioned himself where he could cover his squad's retreat and kept shooting until he ran out of ammunition. Then he detonated a grenade when a group of devourers tried to capture him. "That's not tactically sound," one of his officers protested as they watched the battle unfold. "No," agreed, "but it's very effective. Look at the alien formations." Where the devourers had once moved with mechanical precision, they were now hesitating, spreading out, taking cover. They were becoming afraid. The hive mind that controlled them was learning something it had never experienced before: uncertainty. Colonel noticed the change too. "Marines," she called out to her remaining 15 soldiers, "the bugs are getting nervous. Press the attack." It was insane. 15 humans attacking 2 million aliens. But it worked. The small groups of Marines launched raids against enemy positions, using speed and surprise to maximize damage. They hit supply lines, command clusters, and communication nodes with surgical precision. But their most effective weapon was something the Devourers could not defend against: the knowledge that humans would never stop coming. "Sir," the Devourer hive mind said to itself through millions of organic communication nodes, "the human resistance exceeds all calculated parameters. Recommend immediate tactical withdrawal to reassess threat level." For the first time in their species' history, the Devourers were considering retreat from a planet they had not yet consumed. The tipping point came when Colonel made a decision that surprised everyone, including her own soldiers. Instead of defending their position, she ordered an all-out attack on the primary Devourer command ship that had landed nearby. "Ma'am," Sergeant Martinez said carefully, "that's a ship the size of a city. We're 15 people with almost no ammunition." "Exactly," replied, "they'll never expect it." The attack was tactically suicidal and strategically brilliant. 15 Marines with improvised weapons and stolen alien equipment launched a direct assault on the nerve center of the entire invasion force. They shouldn't have gotten within a mile of the ship. Instead, they fought their way through the outer defenses, breached the hull with Johnson's improvised explosive, and began systematically destroying the ship's internal systems. The Devourer hive mind watched in shock as humans rampaged through its most important command vessel. These creatures were not following any logical pattern. They were simply destroying everything they could reach, regardless of the consequences to themselves. "Warning," the ship's organic computer systems reported. "Human intrusion in reactor core. Immediate evacuation recommended." But the humans were not trying to escape. They were trying to cause as much damage as possible before they died. Colonel reached the ship's primary communication array and began placing explosive charges. Around her, the last of her Marines held off thousands of defenders in the ship's corridors. The sound of gunfire echoed through the biomechanical passages. "This is for all the innocent people you murdered," she said as she activated the final charge. The explosion that destroyed the Devourer command ship could be seen from orbit. The electromagnetic pulse that followed cascaded through the alien communication network like a virus, severing connections and causing system failures throughout the entire swarm. 2 million Devourer bioforms suddenly found themselves cut off from the hive mind that had controlled their every action. Without central coordination, they began wandering aimlessly across the battlefield, as confused as children separated from their parents. Commander watched from his command center as the impossible happened. The unstoppable Devourer swarm simply stopped. Individual creatures milled around without purpose, while others began fleeing toward their landing ships. "Sir," Lieutenant said in amazement, "the electromagnetic network is completely dead. They've lost all coordination." "And the humans?" "No life signs from the command ship, sir. Colonel and her Marines. They didn't survive the explosion." Felt a deep sadness. These brave creatures had saved his world and his people, but at the cost of their own lives. They had proved that sometimes victory required more than superior technology or tactical brilliance. Sometimes it required the simple willingness to fight until the very end. Across the battlefield, forces began emerging from their defensive positions to mop up the scattered Devourer remnants. Without their hive mind to guide them, the individual aliens were no match for organized military units. The siege was over. The Devourer threat to this sector of the galaxy had ended, and it had all happened because 50 human Marines refused to accept that defeat was inevitable. 3 days later, stood in the ruins of the battlefield where the humans had made their stand. The ground was with craters and covered with alien wreckage. In the center of it all was a small mound of earth where his people had buried the human dead. A simple marker made of local crystal bore an inscription in both and the human language called English. Here lie the soldiers who taught the galaxy that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the odds. As placed a traditional memorial flower on the grave, he thought about what Colonel had told him in their last conversation. Humans don't do math when it comes to survival. They just keep going until the other guy stops. It was not a philosophy that made logical sense to the mind, but it was a philosophy that had saved them all. Behind him, the first ships of the human colonial fleet were arriving to establish a permanent base on 442b. The galaxy had learned of humanity's existence in the most dramatic way possible, and many species were eager to learn more about these remarkable creatures. But the lesson was already clear. Sometimes the difference between victory and defeat was not superior technology or overwhelming numbers. Sometimes it was simply the refusal to give up, no matter how impossible the situation seemed. The humans had taught the galaxy that defeat was never truly inevitable. As long as someone was willing to keep fighting, there was always hope.